Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mastering English with Podcasts. I'm Raizel, and with me as always is Ricky. How are you doing today, Ricky?
I'm great, Raizel. Feeling ready to dive into today's topic, which I think is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about something super important when it comes to learning English, how to remember words and sentences. And honestly, it's something that even native speakers sometimes struggle with.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, how often have you been in a conversation and you're like, wait, what's that word again? It happens to me all the time.
Exactly. So, to kick things off, Ricky, let me ask you, why do you think it's important to remember words and sentences when learning English? I mean, can't we just sort of wing it sometimes?
Haha. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? But seriously, remembering words and sentences is kinda key. It's like, if you're trying to have a conversation and you can't remember the words, it's like trying to build something without the right tools. You just can't get very far.
That's a great analogy. It's like the more words and sentences you can remember, the better equipped you are to actually communicate. Plus, knowing full sentences helps with fluency. You don't want to be pausing every few seconds to think of the next word, right?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people have this idea that they need to memorize a ton of words, like they're cramming for an exam. But that leads me to the next question. Do you think there's a myth here? Like, do people have some wrong ideas about remembering words and sentences?
Oh, for sure. I think one big myth is that you need to remember a huge number of words before you can speak English well. It's not about memorizing thousands of words. It's about remembering the right words and knowing how to use them in context.
Yes. Quality over quantity. I've heard people say things like, I need to know 10,000 words to be fluent. But honestly, you can get really far by knowing the most common 1,000 or even 500 words, as long as you can use them effectively in sentences.
Exactly. And speaking of using words effectively, how do you remember words and sentences, Ricky? Any tips?
I think one of the best ways is to use them. You know, I used to struggle with remembering vocabulary in Spanish, but then I started using the words in sentences. It's like when you learn a new word, instead of just repeating it in your head, try putting it into a sentence. Like, I learned the word astonishing today. The sunset was astonishing.
I love that. It's so true. You're more likely to remember something if you connect it to a situation or an experience. It's like how we all remember phrases from movies or songs because they're linked to an emotional moment.
Right, exactly. But here's something interesting, Raizel. Why do you think people forget words and sentences so easily, even after they've tried hard to remember them?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think part of it is because we don't use them enough. Like, we'll learn a word, get all excited about it, and then we forget to use it. It just fades away because our brains are like, welp, I guess we didn't need that.
Yeah, totally. It's like our brain needs reminders. And I think sometimes people just try to cram too much in at once. I know I used to try to learn 20 new words a day, but after a few days, I was like, wait, what were half of those words again?
Exactly. It's like our brains hit a limit. That's why it's so important to review regularly and use the words in real situations. And that kind of leads into the next point. How can we relate to remember better?
Yeah, like how can we make the words stick, right? One thing I've found really helpful is to connect the word to something personal. So, if I'm trying to remember the word exhausted, I'll think, Okay, last weekend, I was exhausted after hiking all day. That way, I'm linking the word to a memory,
That's a great tip. Making things personal really helps. And I also think visualizing or creating stories around words works. Like, imagine you're telling a friend about your day, and you just drop the new word in there. It makes it so much more natural.
Oh yeah, stories are powerful. But I guess the question is, what's the right way to remember words and sentences? Is there a secret formula?
I don't know if there's a magic trick, but I think using a combination of things helps. Like, repetition is important, but not mindless repetition. You want to review the words, use them, speak them, write them, and even hear them in different contexts.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of repetition, what about some of the common mistakes people make when trying to remember words? I know I've made a few.
Oh, me too! I think one big mistake is focusing too much on single words instead of phrases or sentences. Words in isolation are harder to remember because you don't know how to use them. But if you learn a whole phrase or sentence, you're learning grammar, structure, and context all in one.
That's a huge one. And another mistake I've noticed is trying to remember too many words at once. It's better to focus on a few words and really master them than to overwhelm yourself with a massive list.
Oh, definitely. And we can't forget the classic mistake of not practicing enough. People sometimes think, I'll just remember it. But, spoiler alert, it doesn't work that way.
Haha, exactly. And you know what? Another hurdle people face is distractions. I mean, life gets in the way, right? We get busy, and then we forget to review or practice.
Yep. Distractions are a big hurdle. But I think one way to overcome that is to make language learning a habit. Like, set aside 10 or 15 minutes a day to just review words or use them in conversation. Small, consistent practice really adds up.
Yeah, and speaking of consistency, how can people measure their progress? Like, how do you know you're actually improving?
Ooh, great question. One way is by testing yourself. You don't have to do formal tests, but just check in with yourself. Can you use the new words in conversation? Can you understand them when you hear them?
Definitely. I think using language apps that track your progress, or even just keeping a notebook can help too. Write down the words you've learned and review them at the end of the week to see what stuck.
Yeah, and let's not forget celebrating the small wins. Even if you only remember 1 or 2 words from your list, that's progress.
Absolutely. Speaking of progress, what about those simple hacks to remember words and sentences? Any go-to strategies?
For me, it's all about using the words in conversation. Even if I'm talking to myself, I try to use new vocabulary as much as possible. And of course, flashcards work wonders for a quick review.
Oh yeah, flashcards are a classic for a reason. I also love using sticky notes. I'll put them around the house, on the fridge, mirror, or anywhere I'll see them throughout the day. It's a constant reminder of the words I'm learning.
That's a fun one. And I've heard people recommend making silly associations, like turning words into funny images in your head. The weirder, the better. It really helps those words stick.
Ha 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 ha, yeah, the stranger, the more memorable. All right, I think we've covered a lot today, but any final thoughts, Raizel?
I'd just say, don't stress too much about remembering everything. Focus on progress, not perfection, and have fun with it.
Couldn't agree more. So, that's it for today, everyone. Remember, learning is a journey, and it's okay to take it one step at a time.
Exactly. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Let us know what words you're struggling to remember, and we'll try to help you out in the next episode.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. All right, till next time, keep practicing and have fun with your English learning.